Welcome to the Cardinal Zone podcast. We're taping this on a Thursday afternoon in Madison. I'm Jake Powers, and I'm here with a couple of Cardinal sports writers.
Tommy Van Nerwin, Lauren Cox,
Zach Grassel,
Matt Tragesser.
All right, we'll get right in it on football. Coming off a bye week against Northwestern this week, the Badgers, they're on a 5-game win streak now, but over that streak they have not beaten a Big Ten team that has a winning record right now, so they get a bit of a chance to prove themselves this weekend. Lauren, Jake, what do you guys expect to see out of them this weekend?
You know, I'm really kind of torn on how I think the Badgers are going to do this week because Northwestern's pretty inconsistent themselves. It seems like, yes, they're 10-2, but there have been a lot of their wins where they haven't played well and they kind of get lucky at the end and squeak by. And I feel like the same has been true for the Badgers in some games. I mean, usually they figure it out more like halftime than fourth quarter. So it's tough because, I mean, both of these teams have pretty strong defenses, but they're both kind of inconsistent on offense, especially. And Northwestern, they run the ball pretty well, and they have quite a few running backs that are really successful and can do a lot of different things for them. But their receivers kind of struggle to get open, and their quarterback ends up having to take off quite a bit, which makes their offense a little more dynamic there. But overall, I mean, they do kind of struggle to move the ball, and this Wisconsin defense has been strong, but it goes the other way for Northwestern with their strong defense and the way Wisconsin kind of struggles to move the ball, and they end up having to have Joel Stave throw it 30 times. And when he does that well, they win games, and when he throws a couple of interceptions, then it gets a little more tricky.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's another low-scoring game for Wisconsin, especially, seeing how Wisconsin's defense matches up with Northwestern's offense. They have the redshirt freshman quarterback in who's been struggling, and he was injured on and off, and he was actually pulled last game because he was just doing so poorly. And he's someone who's more athletic than he seems like. He's able to move around in the pocket and make plays, but he's also will occasionally just throw the errant pass. I believe he has six interceptions and 6 touchdowns on the year, so he has the 1-to-1 ratio going for him right now. And the strength, like you mentioned, is definitely in the backfield, and there just aren't a ton of playmakers beyond that. They have a couple of tight ends that contribute, but beyond that, there's not much going on. And then on Northwestern's defense, it's been weird seeing how they played all year because obviously they've had really strong games like they did against Stanford, which feels like it was years ago at this point. And in recent weeks, they've really locked down in the run defense, and they're averaging allowing a little bit over 100 yards per game, rushing the past 3 games, which they've won. So yeah, it seems like they're locking down, and they have that one. I can't remember his name. I believe it's Walker, the linebacker.
I can't think of his name.
I think it's Walker. Their middle linebacker he's had 3 straight games now with double-digit tackles, and he's just been flying around everywhere, and it's more of a product of the defense that Northwestern plays. I mean, they're in the classic 4-3 defense, which you don't see too often in this day and age of college football. But the scheme that they play really opens up the field for their backers to move around and stuff, and their guy in the middle is taking advantage of that. He's not a huge guy, but he flies around. He's an athlete. That's.
And I think building on that defensive statement, I mean, they're a team, especially in that 4-3, that they rely on their defensive line. And the way you beat Northwestern is you win the trenches. The 2 games they've lost, their defensive line got absolutely dominated by the other offensive lines they played. I can't remember the 2 teams. It was on Michigan and Iowa.
They got blown out both games.
Yeah, and so, I mean, for Wisconsin, the offensive line is starting to look better. It's been better the last couple of games more than it has in the rest of the season, but they've been going against Maryland and Purdue and those kind of teams. So, we'll see how they do against this defensive line. Because I remember in the Illinois game specifically, I mean, they really struggled at first against that defensive line. And, Joel Stave gets hurt, Bart Houston comes in because that offensive line just couldn't protect him. And eventually they kind of got the game plan shifted a little bit and got Bart moving out of the pocket, and that worked for them. But it'll be interesting to see how they handle Northwestern. And I think, kind of like you mentioned, low scoring, it'll be a lot like the Iowa game for me. And I think they could have won the Iowa game, but Joel Stave played pretty poorly, and I think he didn't win anything, just kind of didn't have a very strong game. So, there's a game that was close. I mean, it was like 6-10 at halftime, and no one scored in the second half. Right. It was a brutal, low scoring. Who's going to find a way to score points in this game? And I feel like that's going to be about the same for this one.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you if you thought this reminded you at all of the Iowa game, but do you think there's anything that they can learn from the Iowa game going into this?
I think it was just Stave had such a poor game at that point, and he was still sort of feeling things out and establishing himself as a strong presence in the passing game at that point because they played Alabama up Alabama before then, and then a couple of non-conference games where he didn't have to throw the ball all that much. And I think Iowa was the first time he was really challenged and asked to do anything, and that sort of manifested itself there. And then we'll see how that plays out against Northwestern's defense. Obviously, Iowa was able, as you mentioned, they were able to control the trenches, and that's why they were able to run. Even without Jordan Canzeri, their backup running back was able to run wild on Northwestern's defense all game, and I think that's what it'll come down to again. If Wisconsin can try to work the running game, and especially given how strong Northwestern's corners are now, it might come down to how Dare and Ingold are able to do.
And after practice this week, both T.J. Edwards and Dave Aranda specifically mentioned the Iowa game because one of the ways that Iowa's offensive line was able to take advantage of Wisconsin's defense was through their zone running game. And that's why I wrote my preview on this week because the way they get on the outside with these outside zones, it's on the outside tackle to set the edge, and then the running back reads him and then works from that read so that the linebackers all have to be very disciplined in where they stand and where they can't go too far outside, too far inside because the running back will just read off of that and find a lane. And so they got gouged by it from Iowa. They've gotten gouged by it against a couple other teams too, but not enough to lose just because other teams haven't been able to do it as consistently as Iowa was because this defense is getting better at defending it, but they still have had issues with it. And that's going to be big to see how a guy like Jack Sitchie, who wasn't in a lot of these earlier games at inside linebacker, now they're calling on him. So if they're running Sitchie's side, he's going to be the main guy that is going to be the first person that reaches the running back, the first linebacker on the inside that's right. Because I think T.J. Edwards is very good at being patient and waiting for the right opportunities. And I think Chris Orr struggled with that a little bit because he was so aggressive.
Right.
I think most would be surprised to be seeing Corey Clement play this week. So he's probably going to be out. So what do you expect to see out of the Badger offense? More of the typical Joel Stave throwing like 35 times a game?
I'd like to see them try to run it more. Obviously, I think that's what I think we feel that every week that we want to see them run it more. But I can see the way that Chris has been calling the games lately. It seems like once they try to run the ball for a little while and it doesn't pan out, and then it's just all Stave from that point. And the passing game could get a boost from Austin Traylor this week, even though he wasn't listed on the depth chart at all. I believe he's going to play this week.
He said last week that he would play.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going on with that, but having Traylor back will help. He hasn't had, Troy Fumagalli's decent at tight end, but Traylor was having a really good year before that, and that should help boost the passing game if they have to go to that. It'll be unfortunate, like I mentioned before, that Northwestern's secondary is pretty strong, and it kind of make the Badgers one-dimensional again if they're trying to pass against that secondary. But
and I think Traylor will help even more in run blocking just because Troy Fumagalli is not a good blocker. He's kind of he will come out and say that he's a bad blocker, but if you ask him about his blocking, he'll kind of say that I prefer to be a pass catcher, and he is kind of more of an oversized receiver that they line up at tight end. And there's so many runs I remember, especially like in the Iowa game, it's like they toss it out, and then if Fumagalli's out on the edge trying to hold one side, it's just like. He can't hold it very long, so I think he'll help a lot. And having Traylor back will help a lot in that run game as well. But I think Northwestern really wants Joel Stave to throw it 35 times in this game because Northwestern has 4 defensive ends that are all very good pass rushers, and they like to get in multiple, three or more of them in on third down, so they can just pin their ear back and rush. So if you can stop Agumbawale for 2 yards on first down, and then Taiwan Deal for 3 yards, or 2 yards, or negative yards, and then you get Joe Stave in these 3rd and 7, 8, 9, 10s. He's not going to have time to throw, and he's not going to have time for these routes to develop because this defensive line is going to be able to get after it. I think if Northwestern's going to come out on first and second down, load up the box, try and dare Joel Stave to throw, and they're willing to take that risk with their corners, they can get them right up on these Wisconsin receivers and let them try and win one-on-one.
And the thought of this offensive line going against 3 speed rushers like that is terrifying, I'm sure, and that's something that I'm sure Rudolph is looking at this week, and I'm not sure if that's what they'll be anticipate happening, but yeah, that's potentially could cause a lot of problems for Wisconsin.
It is senior day, which means it's the last home game at Camp Randall Stadium for a lot of guys, including Joel Stave. How are you going to remember his time at UW?
That's funny because he was asked that on Monday, and he's kind of the guy that just kind of rolls with it. He's like, it doesn't really matter what people think. He said he's hopes to be remembered as someone who's won a lot of games. Obviously, he's chasing the record for the most wins by a Wisconsin quarterback, which is, I realize it's crazy for some people to think, but the record's 29, and he's shooting for 30 at this point. And in all likelihood, he'll get it. I think he's really been a polarizing figure for Wisconsin fans, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for what he's done and what he's dealt with at home. He gets a lot of boos at home, which is really kind of disgusting to think about, that people, harp on him like they do, and undeservedly so. And some people have said that, that he's just someone who's able to hand it off, and he kind of can, hide behind other stars, and he isn't exposed then. But something I was talking about yesterday was just imagining if we had this year's version of Joel Stave when he's looked really good at certain points, and how consistent he is when he's able to play controlled, and they're not asking him to do too much. And if you'd paired that with what Melvin Gordon was last year, I would think that Wisconsin would have at least scored one touchdown against Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship, if nothing else.
Yeah, I remember Joel Stave as a quarterback that I kind of always felt bad for. It's weird to say, but I mean, this year, it's kind of like Joel Stave is underrated, because he's made some throws this year where I'm like, wow. Like you kind of, like, I remember going back through, I don't remember which game it was, but right on tape, there was like a 25-yard post route to Erickson over the middle, and he threw him open, and it was tight man coverage, and I was just like, where has this Joel Stave been? And it's like, you look at last year with Gary Anderson and how he had no confidence in his quarterback, and he was trying to get Tanner McAvoy to be the starter, and I mean, you can understand why Joel completely trailed off. And so you see the Joel this season, and he has games like Iowa where nothing seems to go right for him, and even the first half against was that Maryland last week or 2 weeks ago now,
it was rough,
where he was 3 of 8, and it's like, man, but then once he gets things figured out, once he calms down a little bit and really adjusts to the defense he's facing, you see like he did in the third and fourth quarter against Maryland. I mean, he was solid, and then there are a lot of stretches where it's like, wow, like Joel Stave can actually win you a football game. He isn't just a handoff guy, and then there's other stretches where it's like, why did you throw that ball, Joel? And so I feel like between the Anderson regime and then following Russell Wilson was obviously, and I know Jesse Temple wrote a great story about that, about kind of going through the story of Joel Stave.
ESPN.com's Jesse Temple.
Yeah, ESPN.com, Jesse Temple, formerly of Fox Sports, rest in peace. But yeah, it's just kind of like, it's like, wow, like if he put him on a different 5 years of Wisconsin football, and you wonder how different it's going to be, because there's been so many outside factors that have affected how he's played quarterback.
Yeah, and he's such a well-respected guy among the team too, which is such a frustrating thing for him to have such a negative outward perception among people, and his teammates love him, and they don't. When he has a bad throw, it's like any other play for any other player. Really, everyone has their plays off and stuff. They're not harping on Joel. They don't blame him for at Iowa when he had that mishap on the 1 yard line on the handoff. They don't blame him for that. That's a split decision, and that's not a big deal. I would agree with you, Lauren. He's almost someone who you feel bad for about how his sort of outward perception has been.
Yeah, how he's perceived as fans reminds me a lot of Trayvon Jackson, actually, because like as you mentioned, he followed Russell Wilson, which is never going to be easy. Trayvon Jackson followed Jordan Taylor, who at that time was the point guard in Wisconsin basketball. Is kind of, there are legitimate gripes about both Trayvon and Joel, but, they both did improve and showed marked improvement as time went on, but kind of people had already determined their opinion of them, so every mistake was just, under the microscope, was just confirmation bias, and they kind of refused to look at the fact, well, they are actually improving as time goes on.
That's kind of what you saw last year when Jackson was out with a broken foot, and it was time for him to come back come the NCAA tournament. People were like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't we just leave Bronson in? And that sort of reminded me of the situation when Wisconsin was actually playing in Evanston last year and McAvoy is playing. Mm-hmm. And McAvoy obviously is not a quarterback at the NCAA level, and it seemed like, why would you bring Stave in at this point? People were wondering, but he can't be an improvement or anything. He obviously was. He was, the guy who improves everyone around him.
And both of those guys feel like guys that have been here for like 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, finally. Well, look at Jackson's gone, but it's like, finally, Joel Stave. Not finally, but I mean, like, it feels like, okay, you've started your 5 base. I mean, it feels like 5-6 years of Joel Stave, even though there was.
It's like how Aaron Kraft played for Ohio State for at least 12 years.
Yeah, I guess every other Big Ten team said that's how Josh Gosser was to them. Was like, how the hell does this guy still have eligibility left? Or
I'm sure some teams thought he was Ben Brust, and they were kind of just confused. But
we have like Fred Van Vliet and Ron Baker at Wichita State basketball. Like, how are they both still in college? I don't get it.
Yeah, I know. Just move on at this point, really.
So we'll move on to men's basketball for Wisconsin. A bit of a rough opening weekend for them, losing to Western Illinois. So we'll just start off by talking about that, Tommy and Matt.
Yeah, they looked pretty rough against Western Illinois in their home opener, but they've shown a lot of improvement in the last two games. It really felt like after watching them dominate these two teams in Siena and North Dakota that Western Illinois game was more an issue of young guys and guys that haven't played together yet trying to gel more than they can, in their first game together. So many people saw the court that had never played before, and so many people played more than they had ever played. I think 5 guys of the 7 that saw the court played their most minutes ever. Nigel Hayes played his second most, and Bronson was like his, one of his 10 games with the most minutes. And a lot of guys also took a lot of shot attempts that they'd never taken. So you don't expect a lot of these guys to come in and immediately have an impact. So even despite that, you wouldn't expect them to lose to Western Illinois, but it happens. It's sports. You saw Georgetown lose to Radford, I think, and then they came out and nearly beat Maryland the other day.
And then
So it happens.
And Virginia lost. I forget who it was.
George Washington.
Yeah, George Washington's usually all right, but still,
Yeah.
it's it's college basketball.
Yeah, everybody can't look good to start the season. I think now that they have lost this game to Western Illinois, they're kind of flying under the radar, and they've looked pretty good the last couple of games, and they have some guys that really know how to play.
Right, and with so many new faces, there are going to be a lot of growing pains. Already, I can tell that the defense has improved. Statistically, they're holding the past 2 teams to lower field goal percentage and a 3-point percentage, which killed them against Western Illinois. And I just think that they're becoming more comfortable with each other as a group. The last game against North Dakota, all 5 starters scored in double figures, which just shows that they're all equally contributing and just, I think, becoming more comfortable playing together.
Yeah, and even with the a lot of new guys playing, and they're not playing that well. Some guys like Ethan Happ have really stepped up, and he's looked great the last couple of games. After the Western Illinois game, and actually I believe against Siena, he also didn't really show out that much. And Bo Ryan got on him a little bit. He told him, I want you taking more shots. I want you getting more involved in the game. And he's also had a little bit of trouble with fouls. So he put that up to the second half against North Dakota, and he had himself a game. He took, I think, 11 shots. Might even have... No, Nigel Hayes led the team in shot attempts, but I believe Happ was up there, which is good because he really knows how to put the ball in the bucket.
Yeah, that was a trouble for the first couple of games that he was against Western Illinois and Siena. He was sat out pretty much entirely the first half because he had 2 fouls, and down the stretch of the Western Illinois game, he barely played at all. So yeah, you never want to say that the Western Illinois loss is a good thing because it was not. But at the same time, for a young team, I think it really served as a wake-up call for them. And then they just kind of whatever Bo did in practice that Saturday in between the Western Illinois and Siena game, something must have worked because they shot better from the free throw line, and overall, and their defense looked, well, not great, remarkably better than against Western Illinois. Their defense they didn't show up.
Yeah, and at the same time, they've shown a lot of improvement, and that's still with guys like Nigel Hayes not playing to the best of their ability. He's in 2 of their first 3 games, he's made 4 of 13 shot attempts, which is really not what we've become accustomed to from Hayes. And he's done a lot else to contribute to the game. He's leading the team in assists, he's got a ridiculous 15-0 assist to turnover ratio. He had 7 in the game against North Dakota, but he's also not rebounding the ball that well. I think he's something like, I think he's tied for 5th on the team in rebounds. So once he gets going, this will be a good team.
And just kind of stay along those lines, what do you expect to see out of them this week in 2K Sports Classic? They're against Georgetown starting Friday.
Right, Georgetown will be definitely an interesting matchup. They retained a point guard. I remember his last name was Smith Rivera. They played against him last year, and he was just a prolific guard. I think he had 29 points and 6 3-pointers against them. I think it'll be really interesting to see how they match up against someone of that ability. I know in the past 3 games they've had trouble stopping kind of those electric kind of guards, and I don't know if Koenig or Showalter will be able to really contain this guy. And then another thing to look out for is their center. He's listed as 7 foot and 275 pounds, and our tallest guy is probably Ethan Happ, who's 6'9", and in terms of just bulk and size, that'd be Charlie Thomas, who's 245, and that's still 30 pounds lighter than what this guy's going to present to them.
Yeah, and after that Georgetown game, should they get by the Hoyas, they're going to play Duke. Duke's going to beat VCU, no problem. And this Duke team didn't look so great against Kentucky in their last outing, but they are very good. And really what happened in the Kentucky game was they were just not quite as athletic as those Kentucky players, which is not going to be the case against Wisconsin, so that'll be a tough game.
Mm-hmm.
These early season... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, these early season tournaments like this are always so much fun to watch with these like top caliber teams that come together and stuff. It really provides like a nice sort of preview, I think, for the rest of the season. And last year you could kind of tell when Wisconsin beat up on everyone at the Battle for Atlantis, you could tell that there was something special going on there, and that Final Four run the year before wasn't any sort of a fluke, I guess. Like, it seemed like they were able to there was a continuance of, that solid play that we had seen early on.
Man, with Smith Rivera, as you mentioned, he scored a lot against Wisconsin last year. Though even as good as Wisconsin was last year, they were susceptible to guards going off on them. But they kind of, defensively, they kind of were like, all right, this guy's going to score a lot. We'll pretty much lock everyone else down. And offensively, obviously, they were prolific. So that's really going to be the key for them, I think, because Smith Rivera is going to score plenty of points against Wisconsin, I think. It'll be about shutting down those other guys, and on offense, doing enough to overcome however much he scores.
It's the same thing that happened in all of their losses last year. Against Duke, Tyus Jones went nuts. When they lost to Maryland, Des Wells had a ridiculous game. Against Rutgers, I can't remember the name of the player, but they have some guy who's smaller than most people on the court, and he went nuts too. I think he was like something like 4 for 7 from 3-point range. So
one other big note of news for the men's basketball team this week is Andy Van Vliet. They got the news back on the appeal for him. It was denied, so he will be sitting out the rest of the year. He'll be eligible to return next year, but he loses his freshman year of eligibility. He'll have 3 years left, and that sucks for him. You feel bad for him because it's coming over from Belgium. It sounded like he did play as an amateur outside that 1 year limit you're given, but it sounded like he did so to try to get a better scholarship from a school in America, and you just feel bad for him because it's just a kid, and then you see the NCAA, and it seems like they're inconsistent with that. Like, if you don't like to be the guy that harps on all the blue chip programs in the nation, but I don't think if he was a high profile recruit going to Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky or Kansas, that would not have happened.
And to hear Bo Ryan tell it, the only reason he was even in Belgium, an extra whatever amount of time he was because their upper school system is basically like law school. Is how Bo sees it. It's he's really high on this Belgian school system.
Yeah, he's mentioned like twice about how it's like the toughest in the world.
Yeah. So Van Vliet's absence does mean a lot for the Badgers because he would have been their tallest guy on the court, and they have some height issues. Their quote unquote big guys are not that big. None of them are even close to 7 feet like they've had in the past with guys like Frank Kaminsky, and I don't know how close Mike Bruzewicz was, but he was up there. And Jared Berggren played much bigger than he was. So what's going to have to happen is Alex Ilikainen, who's been playing more in recent games, is going to have to step up. He's really the guy that is kind of taking the place of Van Vliet as far as the rotation is concerned, and he's looked pretty good in his minutes.
I just wish the NCAA gave kind of a consolation to Van Vliet and the Badgers, maybe allowing him to redshirt instead of missing a whole year of eligibility. Everything he did was for good intentions, and he wasn't trying to cheat the system or anything, and I don't know. I think it's a completely wrong approach how they took it.
Yeah, it's weird that because he didn't make any money or profit off of it, then they still, it's like, I would have been more understanding if they, like you said, if they just said you have to sit out this year, but you still have all 4 years left, but to take his year of eligibility, it's one of the many reasons why very few people like the NCAA. But now we'll shift our focus back over to college football. There's 6 total ranked games this week. We'll be picking 5 of them. Starting out, number 15 LSU at number 22 Ole Miss. LSU has lost 2 games in a row. That game to Alabama and then kind of shockingly to Arkansas last week. And there's been a report, you don't know how trustworthy it is that Les Miles is coaching for his job right now. So what do you guys think of this game?
Yeah, I think LSU is on the brink of collapse right now. The rushing attack has been abysmal. I think after the first 8 weeks, they were rushing for over 260 yards. The past 2 weeks, they've been rushing for less than 30, I believe. I don't know what's happened to Fournette, but he needs to step up if they want to have a chance to win.
I don't know. At this point, like, Les Miles coaching for his job seems like everyone's sort of freaking out too much. He was all season long. LSU looked like a CFP contender, I thought, and up until the last 2 weeks, and they ran into the wall that is Alabama, who is very likely going to win the national championship this year. And whatever the deal is with Burt in November, I don't know what it is. We took a look at it, and he has a pretty high winning percentage in November. I don't know what it's Burt season. I have no idea.
Yeah, last year they did the same sort of thing. They kind of caught fire towards the end of the year, made a bowl game, beat Texas.
Right. Yeah, I think LSU will get back on track this week. I can see Fournette sort of just shaking off the cobwebs the last few weeks and running wild like he has, up until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't buy that Les Miles is coaching for his job. He's a great coach. He's got a national championship, and they really looked like a team that could contend for a championship this year. And Leonard Fournette is still one of the best players in the country, regardless of position. He's one of the, easily one of the best running backs. I think he's going to have a big game. Look for 200-plus yards.
I really like this Old Mississippi run defense, though, and I'm really curious to see this battle in the trenches the way LSU's offense line to see if they can respond to the last couple weeks, and certainly all the national media, speculation like we're talking about is, where's their running game gone? You know what Fournette can do, so you look at the offensive line then and say, okay, you've got Fournette, what are you guys doing? So now, there's a big challenge with Old Mississippi this week, and I'm really curious to see, like I said, who can win this in the trenches? Because if LSU gets that running game going, then they're back to being LSU. But if that gets stalled, I can't see them beating Old Mississippi.
We got two prolific trench battles this week: Wisconsin Northwestern and LSU Old Mississippi. How about that?
I don't know if I'd call Wisconsin Northwestern prolific, but
I know it's up there for sure.
Top
25 matchup.
Yeah, and they're giving up the fewest points per game in the NCAA there.
Yeah, it's not as ridiculous as them being a top 25 matchup as USC Oregon being a top 25 matchup. We'll say that. But also, for going back to Les Miles, I've always liked Les Miles. He's been a very interesting character. I mean, dude, all his fake field goals and crap, and he's eating grass. Just a very strange dude. But he is a good coach. But at the same time, you understand the frustration for some fans. I don't think he's coaching for his job, but he's lost 5 straight games to Alabama. He just seems to have no interest in ever recruiting any quarterback. His offense is like something out of the 1950s, so I don't think he's coaching for his job now, but I mean, if they don't really like the ship this year, he might go into next year on the hot seat.
And, Miles is a really good coach, but sometimes with coaching in college football and in the NFL, things just get stale after a long time. They always compare coaching to marriage, and I kind of feel like the same thing is here, where it's like it's not like Les Miles is bad. It's just like sometimes and LSU's not bad, they're not bad, but it's just like the fit together, they don't have the same spark that they had when they first got married.
Are you speaking from experience, Laura?
Yeah, for me and my 3 ex-wives. Susan's such a bitch.
Oh my god! So who do you all have for picks?
Ole Miss for sure.
I'm going LSU.
I'm gonna go Ole Miss.
All right, next game, number 24 USC at number 23 Oregon.
Yeah, both teams really haven't impressed me at all this season. I know Oregon's coming off of a hot win against Stanford at Stanford. I'm just going to go with Oregon because of that, and it's a home matchup. But like I said, both teams really haven't impressed me that much this season.
I thought that USC has been impressive with how they managed the whole Steve Sarkisian deal, especially midway through the year when you lose your coach under such bizarre circumstances. You don't expect a team to bounce back from that, and the way they've been playing the last few weeks, I think they're back on the right track and where they were, earlier on in the season. And Oregon, I think, is a weird team. They obviously fell off the map early after being one of the top 10 teams for a couple of weeks, and they fell off the map after losing to Michigan State, and they ended up topping.
They got Stanford, but they were obliterated by Utah too. They kind of threw them for a loop, and I believe they lost to Washington State as well.
It was a bit of a tailspin.
But they did beat Cal right before Stanford.
That's right. So,
and then they're up by Stanford on 2 points, and Stanford was right there. They had, they missed the 2-point conversion and fell.
These are the two teams at the beginning here that were ranked in the top 10, and they just both kind of faltered. But I mean, a lot of talent there.
The way the Pac-12 shakes out too, it's weird, but both those two teams aren't completely out of it at this point.
USC controls its own destiny in the Pac-12 South.
That's so weird.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think. So it'd probably be them. Looks like them and Stanford, or even Washington State could still get into the. How about that? The USC versus Washington State for the Pac-12 championship.
That'd be something.
It's a weird competition.
Mike Leach does some crazy things.
Yeah, they're Washington State. I've been following them pretty closely this year. Every game they're close, whether they win or lose. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, who knows what Oregon's been doing the last couple weeks, but they looked horrible, absolutely horrible to start the season. But they have somehow managed to look a little better in recent weeks. But I'm still not buying that they're a good team, and I like what USC's been doing on the field. Yeah, they've got several losses. I think they're up to 3 now. But they still have looked like a good team in most of their games, so I got USC.
Yeah, these are two teams where it's like, you're just like, how are they doing what they're doing? And it's like, even at the beginning there, it's like, how are they so bad? And it's like, oh, how are they playing so well or not? It's weird. It's one of those like, it's really hard to predict because it's like, what USC team's going to show up? What Oregon team's going to show up? You know, is USC going to show up sober or, something else? So I mean, I'm gonna go with USC in this pick just because I think they're the more consistent team, even though they've had some trouble kind of keeping it down, keeping their shit together, if you know what I'm saying. But beyond that, I mean, this game could really go either way.
Matt, who you got in this one?
I still have Oregon. Like I said, like the home matchup. It could be a toss-up though.
I'm going USC.
Okay. Next up, we'll go over to the Big 12.
Tommy's got to make his pick.
He picked at the end of his thing.
That's true.
I did.
Yeah,
He
roll
said
with
his
it.
pick. So anyway, over to the Big 12. That's the Big 12 very much up in the air right now as Baylor losing to Oklahoma last week. That's their chances at making the playoff are looking pretty bleak right now. But they're ranked number 10 and they're traveling to Stillwater to take on number 6 Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State undoubtedly will win this. I think the loss to Oklahoma really stung for Baylor fans, and now they're entering a hostile Oklahoma State environment. I just see them collapsing in this matchup. I got Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I thought last week's game against Oklahoma it sort of exposed the deficiencies that Baylor's defense has, and they won't be able to just outscore opponents like that if they can't stop opposing offenses. And their secondary, I thought, looked especially weak in that game. Oklahoma was able to move the ball at will, especially later on. And, the fact that Baylor is still clinging on to a top 10 spot at this point, I thought was kind of surprising, especially given how soft their schedule has been up until this point. And the home loss, I was surprised that they didn't fall further.
Yeah, I've been on the Baylor train all season, and when Seth Russell went down, I was intrigued to see how this guy, I think his first name is Jarrett Stidham.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody know his first name?
Jarrett or Jason or
We'll call him Stidham. How he was going to play, because he was a big recruit, big-time player in high school, and he looked great against Kansas State, and then he looked horrible against Oklahoma. So I think if he shows up and he throws, for a good 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, keep the interceptions down, they're going to have a shot in this game, but I'm taking Oklahoma State.
So all three you have Oklahoma State so far?
I have OK State.
Okay.
I'm actually on the fence with this one because I think Baylor kind of got caught off guard playing against an Oklahoma team that has arguably the best quarterback in college football right now, and I think Oklahoma is playing some insane football, kind of not exactly out of nowhere, but like a step above probably where we thought they would be at this point. And last week, Oklahoma State, they were in a close one with Iowa State.
Iowa State, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that Iowa State's played some good teams close this year, but that was kind of like okay,
It just seemed like an obligatory. Well, everybody is bringing up 2011 because that was Oklahoma State was in contention for the national title, went into Ames, got beat by Iowa State. So everyone's like, oh, here we go again.
Something about that state.
I don't know. Iowa, it's just a hellhole. Nothing good can come out of going to Iowa.
Yeah, so, I'm not as confident in Oklahoma State, and I'm not that down on Baylor. I mean, I think Baylor needs another week to prove. If Baylor comes out and struggles against Oklahoma State, then you're like, okay, I know Baylor's not coming back from this. But I feel like Baylor hasn't infinitely proven to me yet that they can't continue to be really good, and I don't think Oklahoma State has proven to me that they're still really unbeatable. So I don't know if I'm ready to pick Baylor, but I do think this game is going to be a lot closer than maybe the previous 3 speakers here have described.
We'll make a pick.
Yeah.
You don't get to say I'm not ready to make the pick. Baylor is going to be close. Pick one of the teams.
Sure, I'll pick Baylor. I'll be the contrarian.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it really speaks to how good this Baylor offense is that their quarterback had a terrible, terrible game against Oklahoma, and they were still in that game at the end of the game. So I think they do have a real shot in this game, but it really all depends on which Stidham shows up.
Okay.
It's Jarrett Stidham.
Jaredson. Okay. So the next game, and before we even start this, TCU, they have 1 loss, right?
Yeah.
And it was to OK State.
They have one loss. They almost lost to Kansas.
How are they at number 18?
because they're not good. And
Wait. They're not good?
Well, they're not that good.
Okay, but they have one loss, and it's to Oklahoma State, who's undefeated.
Because
how are they number 8? They're ranked behind every other one-loss team.
They shouldn't be 18, but people were really sketchy about them at the start of the year.
They should be,
the whole year.
They got that the Michigan State thing, but I don't understand how they're that.
Yeah, where's Northwestern ranked?
Northwestern
20.
is.
It's 20.
I thought is it 20?
I was thinking it was 19.
20.
It's 20 and 25.
Yeah, 20. So Northwestern is 20 and TCU is 18 with one
Yeah.
loss to Oklahoma State.
Yeah,
that's
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Jesus.
But I'll tell you why. It's because nobody liked how they were playing throughout the year. They were skating by these not good teams. And then all of a sudden they got dropped pretty badly, I think, to Oklahoma State. They lose by 20 points.
So what's Michigan State ranked? They're
9,
I
think.
Michigan State's that high?
I believe
Because they're like the TCU of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So that's anyway. The game is number 18 TCU at number 7 Oklahoma. I still, after last week, the Sooners are now in that college football playoff conversation. How the hell they lost to Texas, I will never know. But what are your guys' thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I love Oklahoma's offense right now. It's firing on all cylinders. Let's not forget their running back Perrine broke the all-time rushing record in a game last year. He actually broke Melvin's record.
The week after.
Right.
In 4 quarters. It took him 4 quarters. Melvin did it in 3 in the snow against Nebraska.
I believe it's pronounced P-Run.
Oh, well, another thing is, Boykin, I don't know what has happened to him this year. Against Oklahoma State, a huge game where they traveled to Oklahoma State. He throws 4 picks and didn't really lead a TCU team that could have, possibly beat Oklahoma State. I think he's entering, again, another hostile Big 12 environment. Oklahoma's trying to win and make the college football playoff, and I just don't see TCU pulling up big here.
I don't think Boykin's playing.
Is he not? How severe is his injury?
I think he's done.
For the year?
I know Doxson's out for the game, the wide receiver.
Really?
What?
Isn't he out for the year?
What happened?
Am I mixing him up with a different receiver? One of them receivers.
Let's take a break here.
One of them big receivers.
Well,
I thought it was
didn't know
TCU's
that
receiver.
happened.
Yeah, Boykin right towards the tail end of the whoever they're against last week.
I think it's pretty bad.
Was it pretty bad? Okay. So that probably turns your Oklahoma pick into a firm Oklahoma pick.
And
maybe
Josh Doxson is out for the year.
Yeah, Josh Doxson's out for the year.
So
That's what I thought.
Basically, they're fucked.
For me, that doesn't shake my Oklahoma pick at all. The way they, I'm infallible. The way Oklahoma played last week against Baylor, I don't see them faltering this week.
Yeah, this TCU team hasn't looked good all year, and they nearly dropped the game to Kansas, of all teams, which happens to be a bottom 5 team in college football. And Oklahoma's playing out of their minds right now. Baker Mayfield, like you said, Lauren, is probably the best quarterback in college football by a good margin. So I think they're going to take this game pretty easily.
Yeah, I think Baker leads them through this game and probably all the way to the Heisman.
He's leading them to the cake.
Whoa. Yeah, but Oklahoma's great, and there's a reason Trayvon Boykin's being looked at as a wide receiver in the NFL versus a quarterback. I think he's a great runner, but
great athlete.
When you ask him to be a quarterback, sometimes there's a little bit too much for him to handle. I mean, he can make throws, but he's a little more Antoine Randall L than Johnny Football.
He's got great legs.
That was good. That was fun.
Okay, and lastly, back to the Big Ten, the big game of the week for the Big Ten. Number 9, Michigan State at number 3, Ohio State.
Yeah, I've been, again, disappointed with both of these teams. Michigan State has barely pulled away from bottom feeders in the Big Ten. Ohio State, they're undefeated, but, again, Cardinal Jones, Braxton Miller have disappointed, in addition to J.T. Barrett. And Elliott has looked very good this season, but, I might like Michigan State in this matchup. Ohio State is definitely trying to get into the college football playoff, but, Michigan State, they could be wild and, maybe be more hungry than OSU is.
I don't get it. I don't get why Ohio State isn't number 1 right now. After winning the national championship last year, they still haven't been beaten, and people are, harping on them for not beating up on the Big Ten like they should be, but they're still beating these teams, and I trust Urban Meyer as much as it hurts to say. He's such a this is terrible to say, but he's such a big game coach, and he'll have them ready for this one. And the way that Barrett's been playing, they finally figured out the mix between Barrett and Cardinal, as weird as that is. They have the Chris Lee, Tim Tebow thing going on, where they're sometimes bringing in Barrett and stuff. And it's kind of funny. That was a fun year, and it's I don't know. There's that player there, but it's kind of interesting, and I think that Ohio State's gonna run away with this one.
Yeah. So you talk about the unimpressive, undefeated, defending national champion, which, incidentally, we had the same thing last year with Florida State, and they did not look good in their games, and they didn't end up being the number 1 seed in the college football playoffs. I believe they were 3.
They're 3, and that's where Ohio State is right now.
And, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that disagreed that they weren't the best team in the country. They hadn't looked like it, and, they played a relatively weak schedule, which Ohio State also has. At the same time, I think they're clicking right now, and I think they're going to dominate Michigan State offensively. JT Barrett has looked great this season, and if he shows up to the game sober, he's going to take over.
Jeez. So, Matt, you had Michigan State. Jake?
I have Ohio State.
You had Ohio State.
I got Ohio State.
Lauren?
Yeah, Ohio State's one of those teams that it seems like, the phrase is always that the team plays down to level their opponent, and I think that describes Ohio State in a sense that they haven't walked over to these terrible teams, but they've kind of played down in the sense that they've played good enough to beat them every time, and I feel like Michigan State, they're going to play to Michigan State level, but enough to beat them, and I love this Ohio State defense quite a bit. I think it's just, the Ohio State defense is a step above the Michigan State defense, and the Ohio State offense is a step above the Michigan State offense, and so I'll take Ohio State this one.
I mean, like you said, as much as it pains you, picking Urban Meyer or Nick Saban in a big game is a pretty safe bet usually.
Oh, yeah.
So that's it for the Cardinal Zone podcast. We won't have it next week because of Thanksgiving, but we'll be back the week after that, correct?
Happy Thanksgiving.